Test, test, test.
Hello.
What's up, y'all? How y'all doing? Clap it up for coming out tonight. Clap it up for yourselves.
Oh, you can do better than that. Clap it up a little louder. We're in the museum. You're in Futures. Clap it up.
Yes. Yo, I need you, each of you, to take your phones out for me real quick. Just take them out real quick. If you got a phone on you, take it out. Let's turn that music down for me real quick, please, yeah. All right, now I need you to follow us at Smithsonian AIB. Smithsonian AIB. Make sure you follow us so you can stay up to date on everything that we have going on here at Smithsonian AIB. Now, before we start, there's something that we like to do with our audience. We have a chant that we do here at AIB. Are y'all ready to do this chant with me?
You have to be a little bit louder.
Excellent. Okay, so repeat after me. You ready? Say, we rocks the party that rocks the party. Rocking the futures that we all dream.
Rocking the futures that
One more time. Yo, we rocks the party that rocks the party.
we rock the party that rocks the
Yeah,
party.
yeah, rocking the futures that we all dream.
Rocking the future that
Clap it up, y'all.
Wow.
Thank you for your energy. I really appreciate that. My name is Unray Latil Watkins. I am the lead of public programs and community engagement here at the Arts and Industries Building. I'm joined by
Donnie English, and I'm the programs manager here at the Arts and Industries Building. We're so great to have you here. Clap it up for yourselves again for just being here and participating. Yes. All right, who's ready to learn about our future bodies? Yes, that's what I
Yes.
love to hear. Okay, before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors, NBC Comcast, for making this live stream possible. And let's just get into why we're here. So today we have a little tell me more. We're going to go under the hood, or the pants and gloves, of what the exosuit is. We have an amazing panelist and moderator here to just go all through the details of how it was created and just give you guys a live demonstration. Who's ready for that? To see robot pants. I know I am.
Tell us how it works, Donnie.
Yes. Okay, so this is an interactive experience. I know you guys have seen the QR codes on the back of the seats. So that piece is for the Q&A for you guys. So if you have a question that you would like to get answered on the stage, just scan that QR code. Don't worry, we'll post it up for you on the front row. So scan that QR code, insert your questions, and then our great moderator, amazing moderator, is definitely going to answer those on the stage.
Absolutely. And so for those of you who are seated up front, you're going to have a QR code that appears on the screen. Feel free to scan that, okay? Excellent. So let's go ahead and introduce our panelists. If our panelists can come on up, I want y'all to clap it up as they're walking on the stage.
Yes, give them
y'all.
energy. Yes, clap it up. So amazing.
Ooh, we're getting ready to get into this. All right, y'all can go ahead and have a seat. Y'all look amazing. All right, first up, we have Dr. Richard Knuckles. Oh, we got some fans in the crowd. Okay, we got some family. Dr. Richard Knuckles is a postdoctoral research associate in the biodesign lab at the Harvard John A. Paulson School of Engineering and Applied Science and biomechanical research staff with Harvard Move Lab. Give it up for Richard, y'all. We also have Dr. Kristen Knuckles.
Yes, they are married.
Dr. Kristen Knuckles has been an occupational therapist focused on providing technology-based intervention for adults with neurological conditions for 15 years. Oh, okay, y'all clapping it up already? Sheesh. In her last venture, she co-founded Imago Rehab, helping adults with neurological conditions by providing a motivating behavioral program along with wearable robotic assistance, all from the home setting. Give it up, y'all. Next up, we have Asa Eckert-Erdheim.
Whoop, whoop.
Yes. Asa is a staff robotics engineer in the biodesign lab in the Harvard John A. Paulson School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. His work focuses on designing wearable robots to augment human performance with an emphasis on mobility. Clap it up. We also have David Perry. Woo! David Perry is the executive director of Harvard Move Lab, where he helps researchers bring exciting human performance advanced this to market. Prior to this position, he was technical lead for the Exosuits program at Harvard University's Wyss Institute for Biologically Inspired Engineering, where he oversaw development of wearable robotic systems that augment human performance and assist people with a variety of lower limb disabilities. Give it up. Okay, and last but not least, we have Emily Grassley. Give it up. Emily Grassley is a science communicator and writer, video host, and educational media producer. She was the first ever chief curiosity correspondent for the Field Museum in Chicago, creating more than 200 episodes for the popular natural history themed channel, The Brain Scoop, and has received numerous accolades for her work, including the American Alliance of Museums Nancy Hanks Award for Professional Excellence. Give it up, y'all. So we're getting ready to get out of your way so we can go ahead and have this amazing talk about the exosuit. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you, Henri. Thank you all for being here so much. I know this mic is on, and they said hold it up here, but I don't think they know how excited I get. So, but my name's Emily, as was mentioned. I just want to say thanks to everybody because this is the first event I've done in 2 years. So I am delighted to be here. I am so excited that I get to be here talking about robot pants. That is the name of the game. And I actually asked if it'd be okay if I called them robot pants, and we got the okay. So that is what they will be referred to. But not just robot pants, we also have a robot glove. So let's take a step back a little bit. And Dave, I want to start with you because, right, we are here in the moment of fruition. Asa has the pants on. We've made it. How did we get to this point? What problem are you aiming to solve, and how do you pull together this sort of team of people to solve that problem?
Yeah, we, broadly speaking, I think we're all really passionate about trying to enable a future where someone's physical ability is not the primary factor determining whether or not they can be healthy, whether or not they can be employed, or whether or not they can connect with their community and their family and friends around them. Mm-hmm. So we've been working in a lab at Harvard for several years on a number of different devices that help give people a little bit of an extra boost in a variety of different ways. A little extra boost walking, a little extra boost grabbing things with your hands or moving your shoulders. We're really trying to make a variety of devices that don't do all the work for a person, but give them the extra little bit of help they need to stay healthier and stay active longer. And so doing this is a really complicated process that involves roboticists and engineers that can design devices and program how they move, but also scientists and clinicians that understand what people need and how their bodies function. It also requires people who do functional apparel design that understand how to fit clothing and fit garments to a body really well so that we can interface tightly and provide motion more effectively. And it also requires a large and passionate community of participants that help us test these devices. We have a lot of great participants who some have some neurological injuries, and they help us better understand the kinds of support they need and help us build better devices.
Sure. So when you say neurological things, who are the people who are using these devices specifically? We can talk about, physical mobility issues, but you mentioned, potentially stroke victims. So for, a lot of us who don't have that medical background, what happens in someone's, in their brain after that, and how do these devices help enable that movement again?
Yeah, I think a stroke is something that I'm going to let Dr. Kristen Knuckles maybe delve a little bit more into that question.
Sure. So we work sometimes with folks who've had injuries like a stroke or a spinal cord injury or potentially Parkinson's disease. And what happens with these folks is that, let's say with a stroke, that's probably our most common group that we work with. So this happens when they have maybe a bleed or a clot in their brain, and so that part of the brain actually can die. And the part of the brain was supposed to control their leg for walking, or to control their arm, or control their language. And so that function is now gone. And so what we do with our devices is we try to assist in the place where that function is missing. So we'll give you some demonstrations later about how we have to figure out what is needed to get that movement back to more of a normal pattern, whether it's in the hand, whether it's part of walking, standing, reaching for things. Do you want to? Oh,
yeah, so I was going to say the lab isn't just the two things that we're going to show today, but we do have two things to demonstrate. But you're using sort of this technology and creating these labs of people and for all sorts of different mobility use cases. So I think I've been so excited about robot pants, and I would love if Asa, if you wouldn't mind demonstrating, standing up, and then I think, Rich, you were going to talk a little bit about, what, they're robot pants. It's like a robot fanny pack with robot leg straps, but it's robot pants.
Robot pants is a great name. Usually we call it the soft exosuit, but
There you go.
maybe it will stick. So yes, Asa is wearing a soft exosuit, and this system it goes on the legs. This is designed to help him walk. And so when we're walking, without a system like this, our muscles connect to our bones, and when those muscles contract, they help us move, and they help us walk. And usually, when nothing's wrong, we don't even think about walking. But in the case of something like stroke or other neurological issues, people can't make those movements as they normally would. So what this device does is it kind of sits on the outside of the body and tries to, in a way, mimic what the muscles are doing underneath and help him move. So let me just go through a couple of these components here, if I may.
Yeah.
So what we have here at the top is a textile component. So something kind of like a belt. And this holds everything up here at his waist. And then down below, we have a thigh component. And this kind of attaches to his leg down here. And the goal here is we want to help him move his leg forward. So you can kind of show us what we want with hip flexion here. And so in order to do that, we have a motor that attaches to this top component, and this motor pulls on this rope. And so I think we have a video, if we can play that video of what the motor is doing as Asa would be walking. And I think it's going to be lifting a 25-pound weight. There we go. There it goes.
Whoa. That's so cool.
Yep. And so I think what we can do is actually have Asa walk around.
Yes.
And people can get a close-up view of him walking.
Yeah, and I will say, when Asa came, I was like, they're like, he's gonna demonstrate the pants, and he starts walking around. And I was like, no, but we wouldn't even know if they were actually working. He could just be walking around with a cool fanny pack on, but but they're clearly it's able to assist. And so as Asa walks around, I guess Richard, you could talk a little bit more about like the actual functionality.
Sure. So one of the challenges that we have to try to figure out is how and when to tell that motor to pull. Mm-hmm. And so what we have, you can see him kind of on the side of his thigh. Asa's pointing it to right now. This is a sensor that kind of tells the computer how Asa's legs are moving. Mm-hmm. And so we've done some studies in the past to kind of connect what that sensor's telling us, and then we can understand how he's moving, and then time the assistance with Asa's movements.
So it's not something he's like controlling with his brain. It's not something, not necessarily at least.
In this case, no. This is more tied to his movements.
And this is the sort of thing, and I think you mentioned when we were talking earlier, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing, because human bodies are not one-size-fits-all. So how can this be applied to someone who might have, for instance, a different walk or a different stride? Can this account for those sorts of differences?
Yeah, Asa, keep walking.
Yeah. Stroll among the people.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think the way we try to address that is kind of going back to the basics and trying to understand how people move. And so a lot of that we do in our research lab at Harvard in what we call the motion capture lab. And I think we actually have a still frame, if we can pull that up. And this allows us to do scientific experiments investigating how people move. Yeah, so this is what we see in our motion capture lab, and we have a participant here on the treadmill. And in this space, we have these cameras, so you can see this motion capture indicator. We have these cameras that surround this person. And those cameras are watching how this person is moving. And I don't know if you've ever seen like behind the scenes footage for something like Avatar where they put these dots on people. It's really the same technology. And so what we can do is we can watch how this person moves. You can see that the person in this case is also wearing a mask, this blue mask. That allows us to understand how much energy he's consuming. And then he's also walking on what we call an instrumented treadmill. And this is actually kind of like a fancy bathroom scale. It tells us how much he's pushing down against the ground. So what we can do after we kind of record some of this information is that this gives us a way to quantify how people are moving. So if we can cut to the next one. So this is what we might see on our screen. And then what we can do is kind of reconstruct how this person is walking. And this is a kind of those dots that we've tracked from a session. And then here's a skeletal model kind of showing what that might look like.
So to bring this full circle, those sensors on Ace's legs, those are able to see how he's moving, how fast he's moving, how wide his steps are. What are the elements of his gait that are unique to Asa? And it then needs to know what to do with that information, what is going to be helpful for the way Asa is walking. And this is how we figure that out, is by have people who walk in a number of different ways, bring them to the lab, and understand if a person walks in this way, and we apply this kind of polling from the robot, what does that do to how much energy it takes to walk?
So is this why they wouldn't let me wear the robot pants? Is because it's calibered to Asa? Or did they just tell me that because I kept asking to wear the robot pants? It's okay. I love that
We haven't
idea,
tried
though.
it with the dress yet, so
Oh, where's your robot dress? That's different conversation.
But if I could just add, to Dave's point, what we can do is bring people in, after they've had a stroke, and we can see that, in fact, they aren't moving properly. And then that allows us to then individualize some of that assistance to their specific needs.
So it's not like if Asa was like, I'm going to jump up on the stage. It's like you wouldn't be able to get superhuman strength out of that. This isn't, is there a good analogy for the way in which it is assisting, like the physical sensation?
I think so. I'm going to use an analogy that Rich doesn't like, but I like it. To me, I think it kind of feels like when you're walking on the moving walkway at the airport, everything feels natural and normal. You kind of adjust to the way it's pulling on you. But then as soon as you step off that walkway and it's no longer helping you move, everything feels like a lot more energy. Because it was out there doing the same work your muscles are doing, kind of syncing up with the way that you're moving and being a little bit of a helper, giving you a bit of a boost.
So it's like the difference between a regular bicycle and an electric bicycle.
I think that's a great comparison, yeah.
They told me that ahead of time, and then
that was a plan. That was a plan.
I was like, that is a good example. Yeah. But I mean, to the point, it's like you're still having to pedal. You're still required for some forward momentum. So is it the same way? And we're gonna thank you, Asa, for the pants demonstration. Let's give Asa a round of applause. He's wearing the Spring 2022 collection of Harvard-designed exo pants. Is it the same sort of way, and we're going to go to Kristen because she has a glove, is the technology that is being used, the mechanics of it in the pants, is it the same thing that's working in the assistive glove?
So these are two different things. This one here is using motors and cables to pull on your extremities. The glove is using air pressure and specially designed textiles to provide assistance. I think Kristen can talk more about that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to stand up so you guys can get a little better view. So this is the soft robotic glove. The project started a number of years ago at Harvard, even before my time. And we actually began testing in the population of spinal cord injury. And so those are folks who are paralyzed and they are not able to grasp with their hand. And so what the glove was doing was really helping to provide a nice, firm grasp using air channels. It's not currently attached to anything. So imagine that there's a power source and an air source that's running some compressed air into the parts on my fingers, which are actually layered balloon chambers. And so again, back to that idea of having a team of functional apparel designers, that is really the bread and butter of how this device works. Utilizing different types of fabric, we actually, as we inflate the chambers, that type of fabric and what it allows itself to do, that's how the device moves. So Asa will also give us a little demonstration here as he puts some air. You want to come up so maybe they can pan in a little bit too. So as we just put air into the chamber, you can see that the textile is allowing flexion to happen of the fingers. That's the bending of the fingers. And then if you switch to the other tube, then we'll get extension. And so this glove is designed for people who've had a stroke. And so as I was mentioning earlier, that part of the brain dies and they have limited mobility in the arms and legs, usually just on one side of the body. And the way that we try to help that type of impairment to go away is that they have to do many thousands of repetitions of correct movement. So if a clinician tries to do that, then they're going to get tired and they're going to get bored. So we need robots to do that job for us. And so that's how the glove is going to help someone. It's going to move over and over and over and over and over, way after the therapist got bored, and really allow for those many thousands of repetitions that someone needs in order to make their brain start to heal again.
So this is an interesting idea between both of these assistive technologies, is that maybe if someone went down a line of thought, would it be possible for someone to think that too much reliance on one of these technologies could somehow impact their own body's ability to recover naturally? Is that something that you compensate for, that you talk about?
So I think it's one of the big questions in the field is what happens when someone uses a wearable robot for a decade? What does that do to their function? Do they become too reliant on it? We don't know the answer to that, but I think with our approach here, I don't really see that being the outcome, because we're not doing all of the work for a person. We're doing just a little bit so they can stay more active. It's kind of like the machines in the gym where if you're not able to do one pull-up, there's a little thing you can put your knees on, and it helps you, gives you a little bit of boost so you can do that one pull-up. And then over time, you can do more and more and more pull-ups because you're able to train. But if you didn't have that boost, you couldn't do the one. You couldn't get the reps in you need to get stronger. And so that's what a lot of these devices are trying to do for folks is, if they didn't have the strength to go out and walk and get in those walking repetitions or those grasping repetitions, it would be hard to improve. So we're there to give them just a boost, not to do everything for them.
Yeah. Were you going to say something to that?
I was going to say something similar to what David said, in that oftentimes when people are recovering initially from the stroke, they can't perform the movements. And therapists do a great job, but eventually people tend to develop some sort of compensatory patterns to because they can't push off with their ankle or they can't pull their hip forward. So our goal is to kind of enable people to start making those movements properly, and then sort of wean them off once they start or once they've recovered more effectively.
That's great. In terms of actually making this technology available to people, what is the pipeline for getting this stuff from the work that you're doing at Harvard and to actually putting it out in the world? What is that pipeline for distribution? What's the timeline? How long does it take? When can I get my own robot pants? That's really what I'm after. I can't stop the robot pants question.
That's a great question. I think that if we stopped at a really cool publication, that would be not very interesting for anybody on this stage. We really want to see the research that's done at Harvard making it out into people's lives where it can really make a difference. So we have a lot of support for projects that want to turn into startups, and we give them the resources they need to advance that technology to the point that they can actually spin out into a startup company or license that technology out to another company, which I think we have some videos later on. We won't jump to them just yet, but we have some videos of some folks who did that from our lab previously.
So and I guess we'll get to that later. I want to go back a little bit to the actual construction of these objects, because you've mentioned too, textiles, I think, have come up a couple of times. So why do textiles play such an important role in all of this?
Yeah, so I think one of the really big benefits that having textiles is that people are used to wearing textiles, and there are lots of people who are very experienced in how to make textiles fit well to people. So if you imagine someone trying to wear something multiple hours a day, all day, every day of the week, you really want something that's going to be comfortable, move with them, work with them as they're trying to go about their day-to-day life. and people already wear clothes every day. So it's a kind of natural progression. It's a thing that we already know how to make work well with people. And then another benefit that it certainly gives us is that there, to your point about how do we move these projects out of the lab, the textiles also has a lot of industry around how do you build these kinds of structures. So if we build these out of textiles, then we can leverage a lot of existing manufacturing techniques that allow us to make these things cheaper, more easily, and allow us to make them into products a little bit faster.
And maybe we could just get Asa to take off his hip flexion suit, just so you can see how soft it is and conforming with his body.
Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah.
You can see it comes off fairly quickly, which is
One of the things that, we mentioned assistive technology and how it's progressed so much. I think the textile thing is so important because we mentioned earlier, like leg braces, a different kind of assistive technology, or even using crutches. They might not be as comfortable. And so for long-term care, I can see how you would want to partner with people who have an understanding of textiles. So, and you mentioned Dorothy as a name that comes up a lot. Who is Dorothy in your lab, and why do you love them so much?
So Dorothy Orzel is one of our rockstar functional apparel designers, responsible for all of the cool-looking parts of what you see here, but she was not able to join us. But I want to make sure that she gets recognition for the work that she does. She came from a world of designing everything from underwear to outerwear, and she's bringing a lot of those insights into how do different fabrics move, how do they fit on a body, how do they drape over different shapes of body parts, and that's the kind of expertise we need to have a system that actually fits a person tightly enough that we can efficiently use motors to help them move their legs.
Yeah, I think the motor usage is interesting too, because these things, computers have gone from being gigantic things that took up an entire room, and now everybody's got one powerful one in their pocket. What is the analogy like that for this sort of technology?
Yeah, so we are able to leverage a lot of different advances in other fields that help us make these much better and much cheaper and much more easily. So inside this is actually a motor that was developed mostly for quadcopters, and so kind of the...
Like this one?
Yes,
Right here?
slightly
Nice.
smaller.
Same.
Cool.
Um,
Got it.
But the kind of prevalence of those kind of technologies over the last few years means that those motors are much more accessible and much more available for us to build prototypes, and then for companies to take those out and build actual products. Likewise, some of the sensors that we mentioned here are the same kinds of sensors that are in phones to tell the phone if it's in portrait or landscape mode. And so the fact that those are now everywhere means that the cost of them has gotten significantly lower, and it makes them much more feasible to integrate into wearable devices like these.
I have another point too, is on the device here, some of the casings are 3D printed, and same for our startup company. We 3D print a lot of items because we only need 5 or we only need 15, and we don't need 1,000 yet, so we don't want to go to the manufacturer quite yet. So that's like another technology that has become ubiquitous enough that we can use it in our office.
And I want to go back to you, Kristen, because that is what you are doing. Like, you are taking the glove to, I was going to say to the people.
Yeah. Yeah.
What has that process been like for you? You're taking something from a lab and then putting it out in the world.
Right, yeah. So I'm part of a small co-founding team, and we decided to take this device because clinicians were asking for it, and they said, we really want this to come out, and we want to be able to use it. So we have some funding, and we're working on making this device go from a hand sewn and small production device into maybe being something that we can really distribute.
I think we might have a video. Is the next video queued up talking about the glove and how it's being used with people?
Sure.
Yeah.
I might be wrong about that.
Surprise.
Oh, nailed it.
Hey, look at that. So this is an example of one of our lovely participants kind of showing you, this is sort of a best case scenario actually of how someone's hand and arm might function after a stroke. She actually has a lot of movement. She's incoordinated, and she has to grasp a lot of times to try to get her hand on that basket. So what she's doing here with the glove device is she's getting those repetitions over and over and over daily, and getting her hand to open and shut, open and shut. She's playing games, she's doing activities with her hand in the glove. And when she takes the device off, then her hand behaves better. Her brain got a chance to practice moving it. We refer a lot to the process when you go sledding, and the first time down it's bumpy and a little slow, but the 50th kid down the hill is just flying down the track. And that's how the signals go from our brain. So they start really bumpy and they're slow, or they might be inaccurate, but if you send the same signal 1,000 times, then it's going to be a pretty good signal.
I love that, and I love the real world examples of this too. I think we can sit up here as able-bodied people and talk about like the novelty of this technology, but we're not living it. So how do you see this technology, in addition to this example here, what is your long-term goal for making this available to other people?
That's a great question. We didn't talk about it, no, I'm kidding. So I'm an occupational therapist, and so our field has been around for a long time, but we are not as well known as physical therapy or maybe speech therapy. So part of what we do is helping people with their everyday activities. And so you could see it's really been important to us in the lab is to have this occupational therapy voice and really find out what do people need to be able to do. So if one of your hands was tight and drawn in after a stroke and you couldn't open it, imagine your day. And imagine all the things that you would have a hard time doing. So these are just pervasive and persistent problems that might not go away after someone has a stroke. The other problem too is that especially in the United States, our therapy is really based on how much therapy can someone afford or how much will their insurance pay for. And so if you have to wait to go to the clinic to get better, you're just not going to get better very fast. So that's one thing that we're doing with our company is we are making sure that the device can be in people's homes, and then they have access to therapy anytime they want.
So that comes down to, we talk about barriers, like financial barriers are obviously one of them. And I think we talk about like the technology itself becoming more accessible. Do you also see that becoming less of a barrier for people as well?
Yeah, I hope so. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think so. I think, at the stages the field has been at so far, building largely for medical applications, some of the volumes of production are somewhat low, so things are going to be much more expensive. But I think we're starting to hit this point where there are non-medical applications, applications for general mobility, applications for workers in industry. And I think that the field is starting to pick up a little bit of momentum where it's no longer going to be a niche thing. We can start producing lots of these devices, and I think we'll start to see the costs coming down a lot. It's like coming over here today, the streets were littered in electric scooters because, they used to be this expensive novelty, but they got so popular, they're being churned out in such large volumes, they're all over the place now. I think
literally you can go find one
all over the place.
in the middle of the road right over there.
But so I'm hopeful that in some number of years from now, the streets will be littered in robot pants.
And accessibility devices. I totally forgot what I was going to ask you next. Well, let's talk about manufacturing though, because you mentioned, Kristen, that you can make one thing by hand, but that's tedious and time consuming. And how are you going to make this, or how do you see this becoming more efficient? And how long does it take to make a pair of robot pants anyway? Those are two questions.
So I think maybe Asa can talk a little bit more in detail about how long it takes to make this pair of robot pants. But one thing that really gets me excited about the things we're making here is there's nothing really special or exotic about the physical product that you have here. This is, cutting and sewing textiles. There's plastic and metal robotic bits. There's nothing about this that is too complicated. So, once these move out into a real company that can be produced by, readily accessible methods, there's nothing too difficult that's going to drive up the prices once we can generate enough demand to produce several of them. But when we're in a lab making a handful at a time, it's a little bit more time consuming.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like Dave said, right now we kind of work in prototype volumes, and we're also really interested in trying to make devices that are flexible. So we never know, this was originally designed for individuals post-stroke, and now we've since started using it for individuals with Parkinson's or elderly or unhealthy individuals to help augment their motions. And so we design things a little bit more broadly so that we can do all of this exploration in an academic setting. But then certainly when we start approaching more product level, we can start doing a lot of that design optimization. And like Dave said, there's really nothing overly special, and so we're able to use a lot of manufacturing techniques on textiles or on kind of mechanical structures that already exist and are already done at very high volumes. We just don't do that with these prototype devices yet.
And that's, Rich, it makes me think too, what we were talking about, like the individualism, the personalization of this from the very beginning. So you have sort of like a, do we want to make it more personalized or do we want to get it out faster? And how do you see those two things coming together? And how do you personalize this stuff anyway?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's one of those challenges that we have in a research lab. And it's like it's a very interesting lab to work in because there's the scientific aspects that we want to really understand well, like how do people move? Mm-hmm. How do we understand how people move, and how can we design around that? But then also the fact that we want to get these out to a lot of people. So there is definitely this push-pull type scenario going on. But back to your point about individualization, I think that's one of the things that is hard for us. We're still trying to figure out. So if I'm, let's say, designing a robot, oftentimes I can design it. It works great for me. I put it on Asa, it works great for him. And then we put it on the third person, the fourth person, the fifth person, and nothing goes right. Mm-hmm. And so I think we've figured out that you do need to start to individualize these. And how you do that, some might be from the mechanics of how that person moves. We've also done some work trying to look at like how the muscles are moving underneath of the skin. And then there's also some groups that are looking at brain implants or trying to understand read people's thoughts in some way to predict what they're going to do.
Wild. Sorry, I got really excited about that, but also like kind of creeped out. Oh, I love these panels because it makes my brain go into 5,000 different directions, and I think like that is what we are here to talk about today. It's not like necessarily this problem or one specific thing, but it's like how do we take this iterative approach to problem solving, period. And when you're seeing this like in the lab, how often are you having to like go back to the drawing board? How many pairs of robot pants did it take to get here today?
We don't unfortunately have a video of it, but early days of these projects, before we had functional apparel designers, we had pants that were basically seatbelt webbing strapped around their leg. And over time, we've gotten much more mature about how we design these, but it's a constant iterative process, like you said, where everything about them, can we make this smaller? Can we make this lighter? Can we make this easier for someone to use? So it does take a lot of work, and sometimes it's very small changes, and sometimes it's very big changes, like saying, maybe we'll try and do something that will assist the ankle, or maybe the hip, or the knee, and really trying to explore all of those different avenues to help individuals. So it is, I think, being in a research lab, very interesting because we have that freedom to do that exploration, and then when something seems very promising, we're then able to kind of push it in the direction and try and get it out into the world so that it does actually have use.
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely some sophisticated science stuff that happens, as Rich demonstrated with the cool video earlier. But there's also a whole lot of let's make this thing real quick and strap it to Ace's leg and just like yank on it and see what happens and say, is that uncomfortable? Did that hurt? And then it did hurt. So we have to adjust the design, and there's just a lot of trial and error. Make a thing, yank on it, see how it works, and move on.
Yeah, so talking about your participants, Asa maybe, he gets to be more of a lab rat than others, but your participants, the people who you work with, are such an important part of what you do. Can you talk a little bit about the role that they play in your work?
I can touch on it briefly, and then I'm sure other people might want to chime in. The work that we do is not possible without the participants that we bring in. we can do some amount of design on ourselves, but to understand how someone with a stroke interacts with the device, you have to put it on someone who's had a stroke. And so we're really fortunate to have a really great group of participants who come in and spend quite a lot of their time working with us. They're very patient with the fact that we do a lot of things that don't work or something breaks and we have to fix it, but really help us push that science forward. And so, across all of the different groups that we work with, really being able to build a network of people who are excited about this work both for themselves, but also want a chance to give back. And basically say, this is something that they struggle with and they want to have some role in trying to make that better.
As long as we're talking about participants, I think we should watch the next video.
Which one is that, Dave?
I was like,
I'm hoping the next video that's queued up is a video of an older person walking around in the hip suit outdoors. I think it's a good illustration of, when we're testing to see how well these systems function, it's maybe less useful to get a lot of data on how this works on ASA. So it's really important that we have a large, diverse group of participants who can come in and help us understand how these systems work for them.
Yep, and as Dave showed, this is an older adult, and an example of a use case of, maybe it helps them walk around outside, and in this case, perhaps it helps them walk up some stairs. And now we're showing a video actually of an individual post-stroke or after they've had a stroke. And this, similar to the idea of the glove, you want people to, do therapy in the community or at home. This is a device that we've been trying to develop that allows people to, it helps them do rehab around their house and their community. I'm not sure, is it playing?
Seems the video is not performing as well as the devices are today.
Something else important about our participants that we hear from them often is that, you were mentioning how soon are these devices going to make it to market? And so many of our participants come in, they spend their time, a lot of them can't drive, so they have to have transportation, they have to have a caregiver come with them. It's a big investment for them to come spend their time with us. And they know that they might not actually get to use this device in the wild. They might not actually get to ever take one home because it just might not be ready in the next couple of years. So that's really just like a passion that our participants have, and so we share that with them.
That's awesome. We're talking about the future here. We are living in the future, but where do you all see the future of this assistive technologies? Let's throw it 50 years in the future. We can't all have robot jetpacks, but maybe? I don't know. Are we going to get there? How soon? When do I get my robot pants?
I think the answer to when do you get your robot pants is I don't know. But when do you get your robot pants related things? There are people from our lab that are making things related to this technology that you see and marketing it right now for rehab purposes in a hospital, also some for logistics workers in a warehouse. But I think looking far into the future, the real out there ideas, I think the evolution of these robot pants is actual pants where the textiles are active. We don't have these pods of motors and big batteries. I would be really excited about a future where batteries were tiny and contained a ton of energy, and then just something that looks like regular clothing will help you move about your environment.
Right now that's a limitation though, because a motor can only be so small.
Yeah, there's physics and stuff, and copper windings, magnetic fields. There's a limit to how small the motor can be and still do something useful for you.
So is that the technological aspect? Is that a limitation?
Yeah, certainly anytime the foundational components of these get smaller or better, it allows kind of the entire system to also get smaller and better. So, with battery technology, with more electric cars, if batteries can continue to get more and more energy dense, then we can do the same amount of assistance with smaller batteries. Or if motors can get smaller, or new technologies can replace motors and allow us to make everything smaller, then it kind of lets us move in that direction. So we do a lot with trying to integrate lots of different pieces and bring them together into the system. And so if any of those components, and those components will continue to improve, it kind of gives us the ability to continue to make these devices better and better.
Yeah.
For an example, we used to run this glove in the lab off of a full-sized air compressor, and now, very loud, and now we run it off of a small box that sits in someone's home on their table. So it's coming.
And on that note, the little bell ringing tells me that we're going to audience questions. So I have to pull this up. Oh, and now the audience questions aren't on my document. Well, help. The audience questions, I don't know.
Maybe I can stall for time as you figure out the audience questions. Potentially, if we could play the final video, I'll talk a little bit about a couple of specific projects that we were able to spin out of our lab at Harvard. So there's a group called Verve Motion who took a lot of the foundational principles from the robot pants, and they're putting it into a system that helps your back muscles. So for someone who's doing a lot of repetitive motions, bending over, picking something up, this is offloading the strain from their back and reducing the incidence of injuries from these repetitive motions. So they're out there right now, they're starting to market these devices, and they're at work in some logistics facilities. Then there's a company called Rewalk, and they licensed some of this technology for stroke rehabilitation in hospitals. So this video here is something called the Restore system. This is helping someone who has had a stroke pick their toes up, and also helping them to press their toes in the ground and generate propulsion to move forward. So just like that analogy of the pull-up bar machine, this is helping someone who can't quite pick up their toes all the way and giving them that little boost so they can pick up that toe and start to rebuild that strength. And so that's a big focus for us now, and that's what the Harvard Move Lab is all about, is empowering these teams with the resources and the expertise that they need to turn research into a real company. Because it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of money, and it takes a lot of people with experience doing mechanical design to make a technology more mature. So this is something that Harvard has invested a lot into, and also the state of Massachusetts has invested a lot into as well, to help us empower these teams and bring these devices into the real world.
Nicely done, Massachusetts. Okay, the audience Q&A has reappeared on my technology that was working unreliably and now is working again. So the question, I want to start with Kristen, which is, what is the ethical responsibility to make sure exosuit technology is not used for the wrong purposes? I don't know why they singled you out.
What?
Specifically? But I guess that's a question, like, yeah, what are the potential ethical dilemmas with this sort of thing?
Yeah,
I guess, are there?
There are certainly ethical challenges. So we have to eventually register our device with the FDA. I think that's part of it. Currently, we have a prototype device, so that might be something that's an ethical consideration we have to think of. There's definitely very well documented quality control and safety regulations for us to eventually be able to pursue funding, such as going through like insurance companies to pay for a device. So there's a huge, pathway that we have to walk down that we're only getting started with now.
And then I guess, another thing to kind of touch on is certainly we want to try and make these devices accessible for everyone. And so obviously financial is a considerable part of that. And so by trying to continue to push down the cost of these devices and try and get them out and really work hard to try and figure out how do we make sure that these devices are things that everyone has access to, I think is really important. And also, we hope that by building these kind of devices, it allows more equitable access to, let's say, good rehab, where if you can't afford as much in-clinic rehab, you maybe do have some pathway to continuing to get better and continuing your recovery that maybe doesn't exist in the current system.
That's great. Rich, I think this is a good question for you, which is, how do you account for like irregular walking, hiking, walking on the beach, that sort of thing? How do you do that?
I'll say we're still trying to figure that out. Yeah, so, I think one of the ways we do it is just through experimentation. So, we can put a lot of sensors on people, have them walk on the beach, have them walk, upstairs, and collect all that data. I guess I don't want to get too much into this, but AI and machine learning are a pretty hot topic right now, and I guess the idea is that we can throw all that data into an algorithm, and it tells us how people are moving, and then we can then tell the robot how to adapt with that.
I think the big point there was, though, it's done out of the lab. We can't just put everybody on a treadmill and have them walk and say that is walking. That is walking on a treadmill. So if we want to assist them to do something else, we need to make them do something else or ask them nicely.
Asa, go run into the audience. Just make Asa do it. I think that's what. Someone asks, how can we try the suit ourselves? And I think if I knew the answer to that, I would have found out.
There's a line.
Get in line. No, but I guess this just comes back to like that pipeline question of how can other people use this technology who might be excited about it, who want to help get this into the hands of more people who could use it? Is there a way for us normal people who can help this process a little faster?
I suppose there is a recruiting pipeline we could give a plug for if you are interested in being a participant in our studies and are in the Boston area, or like to shuttle yourself to the Boston area just to participate. I don't know if maybe Rich or Kristen, you know the best place for people to go to look for that, but a lot of our groups are constantly recruiting for people to participate in studies with these systems. So that's the immediate term way someone can play with robot pants.
We're going to suggest that people go to either Wyss Institute website or the Harvard Biodesign website and try to follow some links.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And we do have people come from out of state, people that are just interested in what we're doing and they want to participate. And so that is, we welcome that.
What are some of the other things? I know we talked about we have the glove and the hip flexor. Is that the actual name for robot pants? The hip flexor. Right?
That's what it does for you. Helps your hip flexors.
There we go. What are some of the other things that are being worked on in the lab?
So I'll touch on perhaps the lower extremity work. So I think we did have an example of somebody walking out in the community with an ankle device. And so after somebody's had a stroke, sometimes they can't pick up their toes, and that leads to tripping. So similar to, I think, the video that Dave showed of the Reebok system in the clinic, we're also developing that further. And then Asa showed the hip flexion system. And I think if we move to the upper extremity, Kristen showed the glove, but also, oftentimes people, if you're going to pick up something, you have to actually get your hand to it. And so we have systems which are, inflatable, similar to this, that are designed to help lift your shoulder up, perhaps extend your elbow, so that you can use your hand in a functional manner.
There's also a lot of stuff happening that doesn't necessarily look like wearable robotics. It's wearable technology. It's, we have a deep understanding of how the body moves and how to interpret the way a body is moving. And we have folks applying that knowledge to better fitness routines, much more informed workout strategies for people, understanding what type of movements are helpful for them during that. Also have folks working on using electrical stimulation, so your body is the robot. And I think one thing that is worth pointing out, Rich touched on the ankle system someone was wearing out in the community. That is an evolution from the system that is available right now that Reebok makes, that is affordable to a hospital to use for rehabilitation. That ankle device a person is wearing in the community, that's the next generation where we are pushing towards a device that's affordable to a hospital to a device that's affordable to a person. So we can really start spreading the influence of these things.
Asa, this is a question for you about battery technology and how that is changing. And one of the questions I thought was interesting is battery life. What happens if you're out on a stroll and your robot pants die? What then?
Yeah, so that's something that we really try and consider when we're thinking about the group of individuals that we're trying to help. So actually for the ankle system that you saw in the video earlier, it actually functions by having basically a passive support to help keep the toes up, and then we use a motor to try and provide some of that propulsion to help the person move. And that decision was made because if someone is out and about in the world and the battery does die, we want them to still be in a position where they can continue to walk safely, they can continue to move, and go about their day-to-day task without being unsafe. So it really depends on the type of task. If it's someone who is fairly mobile and we're just adding a little bit of boost, but they can continue to get around without it, then it's less of a concern. But we obviously do care about trying to make sure that people can use these devices, but then it doesn't become a hindrance or they, end up 3 miles away from their house and the battery runs out and they can't get home.
Oh no.
It's another plug for soft robotics. They're fabric. They're meant to not get in your way. They're meant to assist you when it's appropriate, and if they're turned off, then generally you don't notice them that much. So that's really a benefit of this type of technology.
Is the power use thing something that you're also dealing with as well?
For the glove device?
Yeah.
We're plugged in right now. We have a limitless source, but we are exploring the possibility of making it wearable, meaning can you go around your house? Can you be, in your bedroom doing something? Can you, then use the glove in your kitchen? So that would be, using life as therapy. That's getting repetition throughout an entire day as opposed to an hour-long session.
But this idea about battery power and how much battery power should we put in devices, I think really interesting because it's this constant struggle and back and forth between the engineering teams and the science teams. You could, put a big motor on someone that requires gigantic batteries and just have all the power to move their legs around, but then it's going to be so heavy that maybe it's doing more harm than good and it's kind of a hassle to carry around. So a lot of the early stage of development is figuring out how much power is useful, how much battery is that going to mean you have to carry, how much motor does that mean you have to carry, and really finding that sweet spot where it's doing enough to be helpful, but it's not so big and clunky that it's harmful.
That's great. I love everything we've talked about today. I just want to pass it back to you guys. If they're just maybe quick, we could start with Rich. What are you most excited about the future, thinking about this technology? What gets you super jazzed to go into the lab every day? Maybe we'll go to Kristen.
So, one of the areas that I think we can really make a huge impact in is trying to work with therapists in like inpatient clinics and try to start, helping the therapist help these people recover quickly and more effectively. I think that's potentially where we'll see a really big impact.
As a therapist, I get asked a lot, well, does that make you worried? Are you worried that the robot is going to take your job away? No. I want the robot to help me because doing thousands and thousands of repetitions for someone is kind of boring. But if they can do it from their own house and they can do this 7 days a week and 3 times a day, they're actually going to get better. And when they have to wait to come see me in a clinic twice a week and they canceled because their car didn't turn on, then I don't get to see them and they're not going to get better. So this is going to enable people to actually get better in a time frame that's going to make them happy, and that makes me happy.
Asa, what about you?
Yeah, I think just trying to get more and more of these devices out to people it feels like we're at a really exciting point now where both in our lab and in kind of other groups, other companies in this space are starting this transition from early prototypes, not really sure how it's going to work, to things that actually seem beneficial enough now to get into the real world. And then we learn so much from that. There's kind of a limit to how much we can do when we're testing 3 people a couple times a week in our lab. And that's great, but when we have hundreds or thousands of these devices out into the world, we can build up such a richer understanding of how people might use these devices and use that to better inform how we might design a new device that helps people even more.
Crowdsourcing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I kind of said it to be absurd earlier when I said maybe in the future the streets will be littered in robot pants. But that is honestly what I'm really excited about, is when we can get these to the point where it's not just for a specific physical impairment. It's for everyone. It helps everyone move around, and it's better than an electric scooter because you stay healthy because you still have to kind of walk. Once we get to that point, these things will be affordable enough that the people who really need them to interact with their community, really need them to stay healthy, they'll be able to access them much more easily. So once we can get to that point where these are freely available, I think that's a really exciting future. And I think it's, there's been about a decade of more rapid progression in this field. And it kind of feels like we're reaching that tipping point where you'll start to see these things out in the wild.
I love it. I love it. I love that sentiment. I love robot pants. People are going to be like, Asa, where'd you get those pants? They're pretty great. I want my own. So I just want to toss it back to the AIB team. I think they're back there. And just, yeah, thank you all for this. Thank you for the demonstration. Thank you for being here. Thank you for entertaining me screaming robot pants. Thank you. Yes.
Great job, Emily. Give it up for Emily. David. Asa.
Check.
Kristen, Richard. And give it up for yourselves for joining us this evening, y'all. What we got, Donnie?
All right, so we have one more thing with your phone. Everyone take out your phone. We love feedback as a museum. We want to hear your thoughts about tonight. You should see a word cloud pop up, and the more words also online, please feel free to join in. And as these words just pop up, I can't see them, so I'm gonna need the crowd to shout them out as they come in. And just tell me how you feel tonight, or even if you want to shout it out right now. Alive? Yes. I will say, when we were talking about robot pants, all I could think about was Jimmy Neutron and the pants just taking over. So I'm glad to know that's not the case. Oh, inspired. I see cool, hopeful, engaged, enlightening, bodacious. Wow.
Bodacious, really? Yo, y'all, so we thank you so much for joining us. Again, we want you to follow us at the Smithsonian AIB. We want you all to know that you can also catch the live stream of this afterwards. So we're going to make it available to you all to watch it and rewatch it again and again and again and again and learn about the exosuit over and over and over again. So make sure that you check us out on YouTube, Smithsonian Arts and Industries Building, so you can check out the full stream. Upcoming, we have our next program that's going to be an interactive playback theater performance that's happening next week right here. So make sure you join us. Stay connected to Smithsonian AIB. We want to thank you again for joining us, and clap it up for our panelists and our moderator once again.
Yes. And one more thank you. We love a thank you. Thank you again to our sponsors who are producing this live streaming for us, NBC Comcast.
Thank you.
Yes.
Have a good night.